Please stay. Stay with me.
My mother used to work at a hotel in Washington, D.C., back in the 90s, as a housekeeper. Anytime high-profile guests would stay at the hotel, the manager always sent my mom to clean the room since she was good at it. One day, a guest came. We'll refer to him as Mr. M. He checked into their most expensive suite. As usual, the manager told my mom to take care of his room. As she got there, there was a "Do Not Disturb" sign, so she told the manager she would come back later. What was weird was that no one was ever allowed in his room. The man stayed there for over a month, and not one time did he let a staff come in to clean. However, he gave a warm welcome every time he passed a staff member, so no one paid him any attention. Then one day, people didn't see him anymore, so they assumed he checked out, even though the receptionist had no account of this. Since it had been so long since the room was cleaned and the "Do Not Disturb" sign wasn't on the door anymore, the manager told my mom to go check it out and try to clean up what she could. As she got to the floor and unlocked the door to the room, a disturbing smell hit her. She couldn't figure out what it was, but she continued to survey the room, which was disgustingly messy. My mom was still shocked by the smell, so she tried to track it down. As she followed the smell, she could tell it was coming from the closet. When she opened the closet, there was nothing but a cardboard box on the ground from which the smell was resonating. When she opened the box, what she saw scarred her to this day. It was a decomposing head of a young woman. My mother immediately screamed and got out of there, where she fainted in the elevator. Once she woke up, cops were everywhere and the hotel was like a CSI scene. The manager told her that Mr. M wasn't his real name and he used a fake credit card to check in. The head of the woman was identified to be that of a sex worker. Needless to say, my mom quit that day. Before my family and I moved to another state, my father went and visited the area to check on the progress of our new house, which was being built. My father was there for a few days and was staying at some crappy Motel 6 in a shady area of town. His room was the last room at the end of the hallway on the top floor. In the middle of the night on the last night in town, he was woken by the phone ringing in his room. He groggily answers. It was the front desk and they say something along the lines of, "Sorry to wake you, but we've been receiving a couple of reports about rooms being broken into. We are calling to make sure you lock your door." My father replies that he is fine and hangs up. He decides to go double-check the door. As he sits up in bed, he notices that the door to his room is ajar. Being spooked, he cautiously checks the room and finds that nothing is missing and no one else is in the room. He creeps to the door and peeks out. Sitting right outside his room on the windowsill is his shaving kit. Creeped out of his mind, he quickly grabs it and locks the door. After he calms down a bit, he calls down to the front desk and says, "Hey, you just called me about the break-ins around the hotel, and I just want to report that my room was broken into when I was sleeping, although nothing's taken and I am fine. Figured you would like to know." The front desk replies, "You must be mistaken. We never called your room and we haven't received any reports of break-ins." We were on a road trip from Los Angeles to San Francisco and had a long drive ahead of us to Santa Barbara. As the sun began to set, we arrived at our destination, and I couldn't imagine a more lovely bed and breakfast than the Simpson House Inn. Like most Victorian homes in that era, the rooms were not en suite. My bathroom was located in the hall and had period features like a pull chain, wooden toilet, and stained glass window. We relaxed on the veranda and soaked in the expansive green lawns with carefully manicured landscaping. Gail, the innkeeper, served wine and hors d'oeuvres and explained the history of the house. We turned in for the night around 10 p.m., but I had trouble sleeping. I woke intermittently throughout the night and wondered about the time. It felt as if hours had passed. Exhausted and in a drowsy state of consciousness, I saw a very thin woman walk into my room. She looked so petite and frail. Her presence felt threatening, and as she sat on the bed beside me, she barely made a dent on the mattress. As I laid on my back with arms at my sides and unable to defend myself, I waited for something dreadful to happen. In the most gentle and caring way, she pulled the crocheted throw blanket up and around my shoulders, and carefully tucked the linens around me. Within moments, peace swelled over me, and the fear faded. I began to realize that she came to comfort me and make me feel at home. Then, I slipped into a state of unconsciousness. That morning when I awoke, my body was in the same position as when the woman visited. A chill ran through my body, but I felt refreshed and completely rested as if I had a full night of sleep. At breakfast, I described the experience to my friends and the innkeeper. My friends didn't believe me and thought I had a dream until Gail responded, "Oh, that was Emily, she used to live here." In November of 2019, I was enjoying dinner at Cape Paul's restaurant in New Orleans. Before diving into my dinner, I decided to use the restroom and felt lucky that it was so close to our table, as that meant that I could get back to my dinner quicker. Our family of 5 was seated on the second floor of the 2-story building. As I sat in the restroom, I remember vividly that there was a wide enough gap beneath my stall that I would be able to notice, and definitely hear, the main door to the small restroom opening. I didn't see it swing open, nor did I hear anyone exit the 2 stalls next to me. However, I did hear the sink begin blasting at full pressure. That sound caught my attention because I could have absolutely sworn that I was alone in that compact restroom. I walked out of my stall and went over to the double sink to wash my hands. A young woman with jet black hair and alluring makeup scrubbed her hands in a manic fashion next to me as I lathered my own. Every once in a while she would look over at me and grin in a way that made me uncomfortable. When I looked over into her basin, I noticed a large gash on her palm that was bleeding profusely, turning the sink water ruby red as it ran off her hand. The sight was so bloody that my breath froze in my throat. My boyfriend is scared of me now. I broke a glass and he's scared of me now. She laughed as she said this and continued giving me that odd grin. Her behavior was so unusual that I presumed she must have been very drunk. "You should really put pressure on that," I said nonchalantly. She continued to stare at me with a Joker-sized smile and repeated her original sentiments. I nodded politely and left the restroom abruptly, feeling dizzy and now very disturbed. I relayed the story to my family at our dinner table, and we waited for the bizarre young woman to walk out of the door. None of us ever saw the restroom door open. I looked around the dining room throughout the course of our meal and never saw her face at any of the tables. There was a first-floor dining room, but she would have had to take an elevator and walk pretty far to use the restroom near us. This wouldn't have made much sense considering there were first-floor restrooms. I visited the bathroom once more before we left after dinner, but there was nobody in there. My mom, my brother, and I used to live with my grandmother in Florida, around 10 years ago. One day we all got into a really big argument with my grandmother and my mom decided to take us to a hotel for the night. I remember when we pulled into the parking lot, I was overcome with a sense of fear that I'd never felt before. It was insanely intense, and I couldn't explain why I had it. My mom told me I was freaking out for no reason. She ended up taking my brother and I to get some dinner to calm us down, and when we got back to the motel, our spot had been taken and we had to park across the lot. We went inside and I was still a little nervous but felt a lot better and was able to fall asleep. At roughly 3 a.m., we all woke up to a deafening crash, and when we looked outside our motel, my mom's car had been utterly destroyed and a truck was on its roof next to the car. Apparently a drunk driver flew across the highway and down into my mother's car. The police officer told her that, had her car not been where it was, the driver would have come barreling into our room at 50 miles per hour, and chances are, I would have been the only one killed because I slept closest to the exterior wall. All I can think about is the fact that if I hadn't had that panic attack, we would have never gone out to dinner and her car would have been in a different spot.